The stark, unyielding walls of the correctional facility seemed to press in on David Thorne, their rough, cold surfaces mirroring the suffocating reality of his existence. The air, perpetually stale and thin, carried the metallic tang of old steel and the biting sting of disinfectant, a constant, oppressive reminder of the institutional confines that now defined his entire world. Day bled into night with a monotonous, agonizing rhythm, each indistinguishable from the last, punctuated only by the distant, disembodied shouts of unseen guards, the muffled cries of agitated inmates echoing down unseen corridors, or the jarring, resonant clang of metal doors sliding shut, their harsh sounds like hammer blows against the fragile peace David desperately sought to cultivate within himself. His meals, delivered through a small, impersonal slot in his cell door, were a repetitive, bland assault on his senses lukewarm, watery gruel for breakfast, a gray, unidentifiable mystery meat stew for lunch, and a rubbery, tasteless sandwich for dinner, each indistinguishable from the previous. A monotonous cycle of sustenance utterly devoid of joy, comfort, or any semblance of human dignity. This was his daily life in prison, a profound, chilling silence broken only by the harsh, impersonal sounds of his enforced confinement, a relentless symphony of deprivation. David, a man of quiet fortitude, maintained a subtle yet unwavering dignity amidst the dehumanizing routine, a silent defiance against the overwhelming forces that sought to strip him of his very essence, to reduce him to a mere number. His movements were deliberate, precise, almost ritualistic, his gaze often fixed on the few, permissible objects in his cell, a worn, dog-eared Bible, a handful of tattered, dog-eared books from the meager prison library, the cracked, unforgiving concrete floor beneath his worn, flimsy shoes. He observed his surroundings with a keen, almost preternatural intelligence, noticing the subtle shifts in guard rotations, the unspoken tensions simmering between rival inmate factions, the intricate, unspoken dance of power and subservience that governed this brutal microcosm of society. He was serving time for a minor, nonviolent crime, a petty theft driven by a desperate, agonizing attempt to secure funds for his ailing, elderly mother's mounting medical bills, a transgression that felt disproportionately small and utterly insignificant compared to the crushing, soul-destroying weight of his 2-year sentence. It was a clear, agonizing miscarriage of justice, a bureaucratic oversight, or perhaps a deliberate act of profound indifference, that the labyrinthine legal system had simply rolled over, crushing him beneath its immense, unfeeling weight without a second glance. He had been assigned an overworked, indifferent public defender, a harried young lawyer burdened by hundreds of similar cases, who had merely urged him, with a weary sigh, to take a plea bargain, never truly digging into the nuances of his complex case, never truly fighting for his desperate plea of innocence. David had been a mere statistic, another faceless body to be processed, another entry in a towering stack of paperwork. Despite the profound despair that threatened to consume him daily, a cold, heavy blanket of hopelessness settling over him, and the harsh, unforgiving environment that systematically sought to break every man, to strip them of their will, David possessed an inherent goodness that stubbornly refused to be extinguished. His compassion, a quiet, flickering flame burning steadily within the deepest chambers of his heart, found an unexpected outlet in the most unlikely of places within the prison walls. He regularly spent his allotted time in the dimly lit, often malodorous, common area, a grim space where inmates gathered, their faces etched with resignation. Here, amidst the low murmur of conversations, the shuffling of worn shoes, and the ever-present undercurrent of tension, David would quietly seek out fellow inmates, particularly those who were most vulnerable, most isolated, most forgotten by the outside world. He would often approach an elderly, illiterate man named Thomas, a gentle soul serving a long, seemingly endless sentence, who struggled painfully and endlessly to decipher the handwritten letters from his estranged family, his eyes failing him. David, without seeking any reward or recognition, without a single expectation of personal gain, would patiently read Thomas's letters aloud, his voice soft, empathetic, and filled with a rare tenderness, conveying every nuance of the words, every unspoken emotion. Then, with the same meticulous patience, he would carefully write responses, carefully articulating Thomas's heartfelt messages, ensuring his words reached their intended recipients. He would also spend countless hours with younger, bewildered inmates, fresh from the outside world, patiently explaining the complex, often arbitrary, complexities of prison rules and regulations, guiding them through the bewildering labyrinth of confinement, helping them avoid disciplinary infractions that could prolong their sentences. He saw their fear, their confusion, their desperate yearning for understanding, and offered clarity, a quiet hand to guide them through the bewildering, dehumanizing maze of the prison system. This selfless dedication, these unwavering acts of profound empathy, demonstrated his inherent compassion and an unacknowledged intelligence that transcended the prison walls, piercing through the layers of indifference and prejudice, making him immediately, deeply sympathetic to anyone who witnessed his quiet acts of kindness. David often found himself unconsciously tracing a faint, almost imperceptible scar on his left thumb, a tiny, silvery line mostly hidden by his calloused, working man's skin. It was a relic from a childhood incident, a forgotten accident involving a broken piece of rusted machinery on his father's small, struggling farm. A moment when he had learned the harsh, unforgiving realities of physical labor and the brutal grip of poverty. But it was also a subtle reminder of a past intellectual pursuit, a brief, passionate foray into complex puzzles, intricate mechanics, and abstract design that had been abruptly cut short by the harsh realities of circumstance and the overwhelming demands of survival. He constantly carried a small, worn, seemingly ordinary pebble in his pocket, its smooth, cool surface, a comforting, almost grounding, presence against his fingertips. He would occasionally fiddle with it, his thumb tracing its contours, a faraway, almost melancholic look in his eyes, as if remembering a distant, freer world, a life he had once dreamed of. This simple, unassuming stone was his anchor, his secret link to a forgotten past, a tactile reminder of the world beyond these walls. He also had an unusual habit, a quiet quirk that baffled most guards, but subtly intrigued the perceptive prison librarian. He would meticulously organize the few, often tattered and well-worn, books he had access to in the prison library. He would arrange them not by genre or author, but by subtle thematic connections, by the nuanced flow of ideas, by the intricate relationships between disparate concepts, creating an intricate, almost intuitive system that only he could truly understand. He would also notice subtle inconsistencies in the daily prison routine, the slight, almost imperceptible variations in a guard's patrol route, the almost imperceptible changes in the cadence of the meal cart, minute details that others, in their resignation or complacency, overlooked entirely, hinting at a sharp, analytical mind far, far beyond his perceived station as a common inmate. On rare occasions, he would inadvertently display an uncanny ability to recall obscure legal facts, complex historical details, or intricate scientific principles from a news report, surprising even the cynical guards or his fellow inmates, who would stare at him in bewildered silence. But he would quickly downplay it with a dismissive shrug, retreating back into his quiet, unassuming demeanor, wary of drawing too much attention to himself in this harsh environment where any display of brilliance or individuality could be perceived as a threat, a challenge to the established order. His days were a monotonous, soul-numbing rhythm of prison life, the clatter of metal trays during mealtimes, the shuffling of worn shoes in the cramped yard, the hushed, almost conspiratorial whispers of inmates, and the constant underlying tension that simmered perpetually beneath the surface, a low, dangerous hum. Yet, David found a quiet, profound refuge in the few precious hours he was permitted in the prison library. He would lose himself completely in the dusty, ancient tomes, his mind absorbing information like a parched sponge, seeking a solace that transcended the harsh, unyielding realities of his confinement. He rarely engaged in the typical prison politics or power struggles, preferring, instead, to observe, to listen, to absorb, to learn from the silent drama unfolding around him. His primary goal was simply to survive, to endure his unjust sentence with quiet dignity, and to return to his elderly mother, who was his sole remaining family, his only anchor to the outside world. He often thought of her, frail and alone in their small, struggling farmhouse, a pervasive worry that gnawed relentlessly at the edges of his hard-won peace, disrupting his fragile sense of calm. The silence of his cell, a heavy, suffocating blanket of solitude, became his involuntary, unyielding classroom, a place where his mind, unburdened by external distractions, began to awaken, slowly but profoundly, to a new, unexpected calling, a simmering intellectual curiosity he never knew he possessed. He knew, with an instinctive certainty that vibrated deep in his bones, that there was a larger truth to his situation, a deeper flaw in the labyrinthine system that had unjustly imprisoned him, and a growing, persistent, almost insatiable urge to understand it began to stir, slowly, powerfully, within his quiet depths, a silent rebellion against his predetermined fate. This quiet intellectual awakening was the subtle, almost imperceptible tremor before a profound shift in his life, a profound turning point that would redefine his purpose and propel him towards an unexpected destiny. The stale air of the prison, usually a monotonous backdrop to David Thorne's quiet existence, suddenly thickened, pressing in on him with an almost unbearable weight. The distant clang of metal doors, the muffled shouts of guards, and the low hum of fluorescent lights all seemed to sharpen, intensifying into a jarring, oppressive symphony that echoed the turmoil in his heart. His already meager meals tasted like ash, and the cold concrete walls of his cell felt less like a boundary and more like an impenetrable tomb, sealing him off from the world he desperately longed to protect. One bleak Tuesday morning, the monotonous routine of prison life was abruptly shattered by a piece of paper, thin and innocuous in appearance, yet carrying the devastating force of a wrecking ball. It was a letter from his sister, Maria, her usually neat handwriting now frantic, almost illegible, streaked with what he instinctively knew were tears. David's hands, calloused from years of farm work and now prison labor, trembled as he unfolded it. The words blurred, then sharpened, each one a hammer blow to his spirit. His elderly mother, frail and living alone in their small, struggling farmhouse, was losing their home, a predatory legal firm, exploiting a loophole in a decades-old property deed and leveraging her failing health and limited legal knowledge, was initiating a swift, ruthless foreclosure. The letter spoke of aggressive lawyers, confusing documents, and a looming deadline that threatened to strip his mother of everything she held dear, leaving her utterly destitute and homeless. This personal tragedy was not an isolated incident. It was chillingly, irrevocably linked to systemic legal failures that mirrored his own unjust incarceration. David knew, with a bitter clarity that sliced through his despair, that his mother, like himself, was a victim of a system designed to favor the powerful, a system where legal complexities could easily be twisted to prey upon the vulnerable. The very injustice that had landed him in this cage was now reaching out, its cold, unforgiving tendrils threatening to engulf the last vestiges of his family's life. He saw his mother's weathered hands, capable of so much love and hard work, now trembling with fear as she faced eviction. He pictured the small, familiar farmhouse, its porch swing creaking gently in the breeze, now looming to be seized. The images burned in his mind, fueling a profound sense of helplessness. David was initially overwhelmed by despair, a crushing tide of hopelessness that threatened to drown him entirely. The cold reality of the prison walls, the unyielding bars of his cell, suddenly felt heavier, more suffocating than ever before. He was trapped, utterly powerless, utterly unable to reach out and protect the one person he truly loved. A wave of intense frustration, hot and bitter, surged through him, quickly turning into a simmering rage at the blatant injustice. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to somehow smash through the concrete and wire that separated him from his mother's plight. He considered giving up, surrendering to the crushing weight of his circumstances, letting the relentless grind of prison life consume him entirely. What's the point? A despairing voice whispered in his mind. You're just one man, powerless, forgotten. However, as he sat hunched on his narrow cot, the crumpled letter clutched in his trembling hand, the sheer, undeniable injustice of it all ignited a fierce, unyielding resolve within him. It wasn't just about his mother. It was about every voiceless victim of a cold, unforgiving legal system. He remembered the countless hours he had spent in the prison library, helping Thomas decipher letters, patiently explaining regulations to bewildered young inmates. He had observed, with his keen, analytical mind, the complex dance of legal arguments, the subtle nuances of courtroom procedures, the powerful, often impenetrable, language of law. He recognized that the legal system, though it had unjustly imprisoned him, was also a formidable tool, a weapon that could be wielded against injustice, if only one possessed the knowledge and skill. He recalled the countless hours he had spent meticulously organizing books, noticing subtle inconsistencies in prison routines, traits that now seemed to whisper of a dormant talent for structure, for logic, for seeing what others missed. He realized that his untapped intellectual curiosity, his meticulous attention to detail, could be transformed into a formidable weapon. David grappled with intense feelings of helplessness and frustration. He was consumed by a righteous rage at the injustice, but also by a paralyzing fear for his family's future. He had always been a quiet observer, a man who preferred to work with his hands, to solve concrete problems. But this crisis, this devastating news from home, demanded action, a type of action he had never conceived of before. He had to delve into the very abstract, often infuriating, world of law, a world that had so easily dismissed him. He looked at the stark walls of his cell, the mocking symbol of his powerlessness, and a profound, almost desperate hunger for knowledge ignited within him. He pictured his mother's tear-streaked face, the desperation in Maria's handwriting. He was the eldest son, the one who should protect his family. But he was trapped, behind bars, a mere number in a uniform. But what if I could fight back from in here? The thought, audacious and almost fantastical, slowly, powerfully, took root in his mind. He recalled the legal complexities he'd observed in the prison library, the inmates who spoke of forgotten precedents, of loopholes, of obscure procedural errors that could change a man's fate. He realized that the legal system, despite its flaws, was a vast, intricate puzzle, and perhaps, just perhaps, he had the mind to solve it. This devastating news, this agonizing glimpse into his family's plight, became David's point of no return. He recognized, with unshakable clarity, that he was the only one who could truly help his family. No overworked public defender would fight with the same desperation, the same burning conviction. No expensive private attorney would understand the nuanced pain of their poverty, the casual cruelty of their circumstances. He realized that if he did not act, if he did not fight with every fiber of his being, his mother would lose everything, and he would be condemned to watch it unfold from behind bars, forever haunted by his inaction. He made a solemn vow, a silent, unbreakable promise to himself and to his desperate mother. He would immerse himself completely in legal study, seeing it as the only way out of his personal cage and the only way to fight the injustice that had ensnared his family. He viewed the vast, intimidating legal system not as an insurmountable barrier, but as a complex machine that could be understood, dissected, and, ultimately, manipulated. He would become a master of its intricate gears, its hidden levers. He formally requested access to the prison law library, his voice calm and steady despite the seismic shift occurring within him. This simple request, a mere formality for others, signaled a fundamental, irreversible shift in his path. He implicitly burned bridges with his former passive existence, discarding the quiet resignation that had defined his incarceration. He vowed to master the very system that had imprisoned him, to become its unexpected champion, to use its own rules against its inherent flaws. This was no longer just about survival, it was about redemption, about reclaiming not just his own innocence, but the very meaning of justice itself. His journey from an ordinary man, wrongly jailed, to an extraordinary legal mind, had just begun, fueled by the deepest despair and the fiercest love. That night, as the harsh fluorescent lights of his cell hummed with their usual indifference, David lay awake, his mind a whirlwind of legal terms, procedural rules, and the agonizing image of his mother's face. He knew the path ahead would be impossibly difficult. He had no formal legal training, no mentors, only a handful of tattered books and his own burning intellect. But for the first time since his incarceration, David Thorne felt a profound sense of purpose. The prison walls, once a symbol of his confinement, now became the boundaries of his classroom, the limits of his singular focus. He was ready to learn, ready to fight, ready to become the lawyer his family desperately needed, a man forged in the crucible of injustice. The oppressive silence of the prison library, usually broken only by the rustle of turning pages or the occasional cough, now carried a new, almost frantic energy around David Thorne. The cold, stale air, typically thick with the scent of old paper and despair, felt charged with his relentless pursuit. This was his chosen arena, a sanctuary within the harsh confines of the prison where he waged a silent battle against the legal system that had unjustly caged him and threatened to devour his family. He immediately immersed himself in its sparse, often neglected collection, devouring legal texts, case law, and statutes with an insatiable hunger. His initial days were a blur of archaic language and dense legal jargon, the sheer volume of information threatening to overwhelm him. Yet, a dormant intellectual curiosity, long suppressed by the demands of a life lived on the margins, slowly, powerfully, began to awaken within him. He faced immediate skepticism and ridicule. Fellow inmates, hardened by years of confinement, would scoff as he passed, their voices dripping with cynicism. "Look at the jailhouse lawyer. Thinks he's going to get himself out," one would sneer, while another would chuckle. "He'll be arguing with the walls by next week." Even some of the guards, jaded by years of witnessing countless inmates' futile attempts at legal appeals, viewed his efforts as a desperate, pathetic charade. "Just another one playing lawyer," Officer Jenkins, a burly, jaded guard, would mutter, his gaze dismissive. This public dismissal, this constant mockery, was a heavy cloak of contempt he had to constantly shrug off. But David was undeterred. His sharp, analytical mind, honed by years of meticulous observation on his family farm and in the chaotic microcosm of prison life, quickly surfaced. He possessed an uncanny ability to discern patterns, to connect seemingly disparate pieces of information, and to grasp complex concepts with a surprising speed and clarity. He devoured legal textbooks, not just reading, but truly understanding their intricate nuances. He systematically cross-referenced case law, tracing the evolution of legal precedents, meticulously dissecting every procedural rule and statutory interpretation. The unseen scholar was awakening, driven by a profound need for justice. He began by meticulously dissecting his own case file, reading every word, every comma, every piece of evidence, even the casual notes scribbled by his overworked public defender. He found glaring inconsistencies, procedural errors, and overlooked details that had been dismissed as irrelevant. His original public defender, burdened by a caseload that stretched beyond human capacity, had simply failed to see them, or didn't have the time to pursue them. David, fueled by personal desperation, saw everything. His newfound legal prowess didn't remain entirely hidden. He quickly became the go-to legal resource for his fellow inmates, quietly, without boasting or seeking recognition. He began to offer insightful legal advice, patiently explaining complex legal principles in simple, understandable terms. He identified overlooked appeal points for men who had given up hope, spotted critical procedural errors in others' cases, and even drafted concise, powerful motions for inmates who couldn't read or write. One particular instance served as a quiet, yet profound, reluctant revelation of his innate talent. Thomas, the elderly, illiterate inmate David had befriended, had received a perplexing court order for a seemingly minor disciplinary infraction within the prison. The order was laden with archaic legal jargon, designed to confuse and intimidate. Thomas, terrified of further punishment, showed it to David. David read it, his brow furrowed in concentration. He noticed a subtle, yet crucial, legal loophole within a nuanced interpretation of a seemingly innocuous prison statute. A detail that even the prison's overworked, often cynical, legal aid attorney had missed. The disciplinary action was procedurally flawed, rendering it unenforceable. David, without consciously aiming to show off, simply explained the flaw to Thomas, drafting a concise, technically perfect response that cited the obscure statute. The prison authorities, initially dismissive, were forced to withdraw the order, much to Thomas's bewildered relief and the quiet astonishment of the prison's legal aid attorney. "How did he?" the attorney murmured, a flicker of professional curiosity in his jaded eyes. Ms. Eleanor Vance, the prison librarian, was a seasoned, observant former paralegal. She had seen countless inmates come and go, witnessed every type of human behavior within these walls. She was initially cynical, having witnessed so many inmates pursue jailhouse lawyering as a futile escape. But David Thorne was different. She had observed his almost obsessive dedication to legal texts, the methodical way he organized the library's chaotic shelves, his piercing gaze as he absorbed every word. She saw him meticulously cross-referencing obscure texts and making connections that most other inmates, or even many practicing legal professionals, would overlook entirely. She saw him patiently explaining complex legal concepts to his fellow inmates, his voice calm, his explanations lucid. Her initial cynicism slowly, imperceptibly, began to erode, replaced by a dawning recognition of his extraordinary intellectual capacity and the profound depth of his legal comprehension. She saw the unwavering fire in his eyes, a dedication to truth that transcended the prison walls. She sensed a profound, untapped brilliance, an intellect that should have been gracing the hallowed halls of law schools, not languishing in a prison library. Simultaneously, Officer Mark Jensen, the prison's lead correctional officer, a rigid, by-the-book man who vehemently disliked inmates who dared to challenge the system, also began to observe David's unusual dedication to study. Jensen saw David as a potential threat, an inmate who was getting too smart for his own good. He dismissed David's efforts as a trick or a calculated attempt at troublemaking, a prelude to exposing prison operations or causing general unrest. A tiny seed of suspicion and a growing, persistent irritation was planted in Jensen's mind. He had dealt with jailhouse lawyers before. They were always a nuisance, disruptive to his meticulously ordered world. Officer Jensen's reaction was a clear adversarial response. He began to subtly obstruct David's access to the law library, sometimes misplacing his request forms, or assigning him to more demanding, time-consuming chores during the precious hours he usually spent studying. He might accidentally lose crucial legal documents David needed, or create bureaucratic hurdles for his research requests. He increased David's workload, assigning him to the dirtiest, most physically exhausting chores, attempting to physically and mentally deter his studies, hoping to break his spirit. Jensen publicly referred to David with thinly veiled contempt, calling him the jailhouse lawyer who thinks he's hot stuff, attempting to ridicule him in front of other inmates and guards, to isolate him and diminish his influence. Privately, however, the growing unease led Jensen to subtly review David's original case file, wondering how such an ordinary inmate had suddenly developed such a keen legal mind. He searched for any past record of defiance, any hint of a hidden agenda, believing David was merely playing a long con. David, though facing these subtle obstructions, refused to be deterred. He understood Jensen's tactics, the psychological warfare designed to break an inmate's will. He persevered, his resolve hardened by the realization that the system that had unjustly imprisoned him was now actively trying to suppress his pursuit of justice. He used his time wisely, meticulously planning his research, recalling facts from memory when physical documents were lost. He communicated with Ms. Vance through subtle nods and knowing glances, a silent alliance forming between them. The faint scar on his left thumb, a reminder of his own resilience, felt like a silent reassurance, pushing him forward. He delved deeper into the intricacies of legal procedure, civil rights violations, and the complex appeals process. His studies were no longer just about his own case or Thomas's minor infractions. He began to see the larger patterns of injustice, the systemic flaws that trapped countless men like him. His anger, once a raw, burning emotion, slowly transformed into a cold, precise weapon, a tool to dismantle the very system that created such profound injustice. He knew his path would be arduous, fraught with obstacles, but he also knew that within the sterile confines of this prison library, he was forging a new destiny, not just for himself, but for the countless others who had no voice, no advocate, no hope. The quiet before the storm had given way to the methodical, relentless preparation for a battle that would redefine the meaning of justice. The air in David Thorne's cramped cell, typically still and heavy with the scent of stale air and confinement, now vibrated with a charged, almost electric energy. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a scholar, a self-taught legal warrior preparing for battle. He had successfully filed a motion for a new trial, a meticulously crafted document based on the legal insights he had painstakingly gained from endless hours in the prison library. The arena for his ultimate test was no longer the dusty shelves of forgotten tomes, but the grand, imposing courtroom itself, a place of immense power and chilling formality, where he would face seasoned legal professionals and the inherent biases of a system he now sought to challenge from within. He knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. He was a self-represented inmate, branded with the indelible mark of a convict, and the legal system was inherently designed to filter out and dismiss those who dared to challenge it from within its walls. He faced immense systemic hurdles, limited access to crucial resources like up-to-date legal databases and expert consultations, the pervasive, almost insurmountable bias against self-represented inmates in a system that valued professional polish, and the crushing weight of a fundamental lack of credibility in the eyes of judges and prosecutors alike. He was literally a man in a cage, attempting to fight giants. The vast, intricate machinery of justice, seemingly impenetrable, loomed before him, threatening to crush his fragile hope. Officer Mark Jensen, the prison's lead correctional officer, had become a formidable, direct adversary. Jensen, now fully convinced David was a cunning troublemaker, viewed David's legal studies not as a pursuit of justice, but as a direct challenge to his authority and the prison's rigid order. He began to actively sabotage David's efforts with a chilling, calculated precision. Crucial legal documents, meticulously prepared by David, would mysteriously go missing from the prison mailroom, effectively preventing their timely submission to the court. Requests for specific legal texts from outside libraries would be endlessly delayed or outright denied due to administrative errors. Jensen would subtly manipulate the prison's internal scheduling, creating impossible scheduling conflicts for David's crucial court appearances, forcing him to choose between a disciplinary infraction and a vital legal proceeding. He would even covertly influence the narrative against David within the prison, spreading whispers among other guards and even some inmates that David was a malicious agitator, attempting to undermine his credibility and isolate him further. Jensen's goal was clear: to ensure David remained a powerless inmate, his voice utterly silenced. David, meanwhile, worked almost entirely alone, isolated in the stark confines of his cell. The cold concrete walls were his constant companions, reflecting the silent intensity of his concentration. He survived on meager prison meals, each bland bite a reminder of the deprivation he endured. Yet his mind, sharp and unyielding, was fueled by an almost manic determination. He spent the dead of night practicing his arguments, his voice a low whisper in the darkness, visualizing the intimidating courtroom, anticipating every possible question, every subtle nuance of legal maneuvering. His worn, leather-bound journal, its pages now filled with intricate legal strategies he had painstakingly developed, became his tactical guide, a secret blueprint for dismantling the prosecution's case. Ms. Eleanor Vance, the prison librarian, remained David's quiet, steadfast ally, his lone beacon of support within the suffocating system. She sensed the increasing pressure on David, witnessing Jensen's petty obstructions. Though she could not openly defy Jensen without risking her own position, she provided discreet, invaluable support. She would subtly find supplementary legal texts that had been misplaced, leave encouraging notes hidden within returned books, or offer quiet words of encouragement, her voice a balm against David's solitude. She saw the profound exhaustion in his eyes, the silent strength in his posture, and she worried, deeply, but she trusted in his unwavering resolve, a trust forged in the quiet hours they had shared amidst the dusty shelves. The looming appeal or new trial date for both his own case and, more agonizingly, his family member's unjust conviction hung over David like a Damocles sword. The legal system, in its glacial pace, had finally set the date, adding an unbearable layer of time pressure. He discovered a critical, previously overlooked piece of evidence from his mother's original property deed, a minute legal discrepancy, a single misplaced comma, or an improperly notarized signature that rendered the predatory firm's claim entirely null and void. Or, for his sibling's case, he unearthed a complex, almost arcane legal argument relating to a very specific, nuanced interpretation of a decades-old statute, a detail that could unequivocally prove their innocence. This was his smoking gun, the ultimate weapon against the injustice. However, he had an impossibly short deadline to file it or present it correctly, requiring a frantic, all-consuming race against the clock. The stakes were immense: his own freedom, his mother's home, and his siblings' future. Meanwhile, Officer Jensen, now convinced that David was actively seeking to expose some deeper corruption within the prison or the justice system itself, escalated his tactics. He orchestrated a false accusation against David within the prison, subtly planting contraband in his cell during a routine search, or manipulating a fellow inmate into giving a false testimony. His intention was to have David placed in solitary confinement just before his court date, effectively silencing him permanently, ensuring his meticulously prepared legal arguments would never see the light of day. This was a direct, insidious attempt to dismantle David's last vestiges of hope. David felt the fraying threads of his sanity, the immense weight of the mounting pressure. He was battling not just a flawed legal system, but a corrupt personal vendetta. He meticulously prepared his defense against Jensen's false accusations, navigating the internal prison bureaucracy with a surprising adroitness. He secretly communicated with Ms. Vance, leaving cryptic notes in specific books, indicating the urgency of his situation. He pushed his body and mind to their absolute limits, fueled by a relentless drive to secure justice for his family and vindicate his own innocence. The faint scar on his left thumb, a reminder of his past resilience, throbbed with a renewed intensity, mirroring the fierce resolve burning within his eyes. He knew he was standing on the precipice, facing an impossible gauntlet, but he also knew, with a quiet certainty, that failure was not an option. He would fight for his freedom, for his family, and for the truth, even if he had to face the entire world alone from behind prison bars. The stage was set, the final judgment loomed, and David Thorne, the unseen scholar, was ready to deliver a verdict that would shake the very foundations of injustice. The air in the courtroom, typically a staid and hushed space, crackled with an almost unbearable tension, thick with the scent of old paper, polished wood, and the raw, palpable anticipation of a verdict. Every seat in the gallery was filled, packed with legal scholars, eager journalists from national outlets, and a small, hopeful contingent of David's family, his frail mother, her face a mask of weary hope, and his anxious sister, Maria. This was the pinnacle of David Thorne's self-taught legal journey, the arena where he would finally face judgment. He stood before the judge, a figure of immense power and chilling formality, his gaze steady, his simple prison uniform a stark contrast to the tailored suits of the legal professionals around him. Facing him was prosecutor Evelyn Reed, adversary type A seasoned, ruthless legal professional, renowned for her impeccable conviction record and her unwavering, almost predatory, confidence. She surveyed David with a dismissive smirk, viewing him as little more than a deluded amateur, a jailhouse lawyer who dared to challenge her formidable expertise. Her voice, sharp and authoritative, filled the courtroom as she presented a seemingly airtight case against David. She meticulously outlined the circumstances of his alleged petty theft, painting him as a desperate, impulsive criminal, dwelling on every incriminating detail, every piece of circumstantial evidence that had led to his initial conviction. She called witnesses who delivered polished, rehearsed testimonies, reinforcing the narrative of his guilt. Her presentation was flawless, her confidence absolute, leaving no room for doubt in the minds of the casual observer. Just as the proceedings seemed to be going irrevocably against David, as a wave of despair rippled through his family in the gallery, and the murmurs of "it's hopeless" began to spread, David, calm but radiating a fierce, unyielding conviction, rose to begin his defense. His voice, initially a quiet murmur, gained strength as he spoke. He didn't shout or resort to theatrics. There was no need. Instead, he meticulously dissected the prosecution's seemingly unassailable case, identifying every subtle flaw, every overlooked detail, every procedural error that had led to his wrongful conviction. He cited obscure legal precedents from memory, offering nuanced interpretations of complex statutes that astounded the court, his words weaving a compelling counter-narrative of his innocence. He methodically presented the smoking gun, the critical, previously lost piece of evidence he had uncovered from his mother's original property deed, a single, minuscule discrepancy, a misplaced comma, an improperly notarized signature that, according to a forgotten, arcane land statute, rendered the predatory firm's claim entirely null and void, proving the fraud that had targeted his mother. He then pivoted, using the specific legal flaws in her case to expose the broader systemic misconduct and oversight that had plagued his original incarceration. He calmly presented irrefutable evidence of the public defender's negligence, the judge's rushed decision, and the flawed police report that had painted him as a clear-cut criminal. This was the breath-holding moment. Prosecutor Reed, initially caught off guard by David's unexpected legal prowess, leaped to her feet, her face contorted in a mask of fury. "Objection. Your Honor, irrelevant. The defendant is attempting to grandstand and confuse the court with extraneous details." Her voice was sharp, desperate. The judge, initially skeptical of David's ability to mount a coherent defense, raised a hand, her expression a mix of surprise and growing intrigue. She looked at Officer Mark Jensen, seated in the back of the courtroom, his smug smirk still firmly in place, watching David struggle with a quiet satisfaction. It seemed for a tense moment that David's efforts would be futile, that the system, in its vast, unyielding power, would simply roll over him once more. But David, with unwavering clarity and an almost preternatural calm, countered every objection, his arguments piercing through the skepticism like a sharp, clean blade. He directly addressed Prosecutor Reed's attempts to dismiss his evidence, citing specific procedural rules and constitutional rights violations with an eloquence that stunned the courtroom. He then, with a profound shift in his gaze, turned his attention to Officer Jensen, who was watching from the gallery. "And as for the inmate troublemaker narrative, Your Honor," David stated, his voice resonating with an undeniable truth, "I would like to call Officer Mark Jensen to the stand. his repeated attempts to obstruct my access to legal resources, his loss of crucial documents, and his fabricated disciplinary reports are all documented, and they speak to a pattern of systemic bias against self-represented defendants within this very institution. He then calmly presented printouts of Jensen's own internal reports, secretly obtained through Ms. Vance, detailing his deliberate attempts to obstruct David's legal access, juxtaposed with the corresponding missing document requests. Officer Jensen, his face draining of all color, suddenly looked like a trapped animal. His smug smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of horror and disbelief. Prosecutor Reed, realizing the gravity of David's counterattack, frantically whispered to her team. The judge's eyes narrowed, a cold, piercing gaze fixed on Jensen. The court was forced to confront the undeniable truth of David's innocence and the deeply ingrained injustice of his incarceration. The room was utterly silent, save for the furious scribbling of the journalists. The courtroom audience, initially dismissive or openly skeptical of the jailhouse lawyer, shifted dramatically. From murmuring disbelief at David's audacious claims, they transitioned to stunned, reverent silence as his brilliance became undeniable, his arguments unassailable. Then, as the weight of the evidence mounted, as the truth of his innocence and the systemic flaws were laid bare, a roar of awe and spontaneous applause erupted, filling the courtroom, a powerful testament to the triumph of truth. Reporters leaped from their seats, their cameras flashing, capturing every agonizing detail of Prosecutor Reed's defeat and Officer Jensen's humiliation. Prosecutor Reed's face contorted in shock and disbelief. Her perfect record, her unshakable confidence, shattered before her very eyes. She saw the meticulousness of David's self-taught defense, the piercing logic that had exposed her entire case as fundamentally flawed. Officer Jensen, witnessing David's triumph, his own petty vendetta unmasked before the entire court, was consumed by a bitter, bewildered humiliation. He stumbled backward, his face a mask of profound shame, utterly defeated by the very man he had sought to crush. He realized, with a chilling clarity, that David Thorne was not just a smart inmate, he was a legal force, a genius he had tragically underestimated. Finally, the judge, her voice imbued with a rare solemnity, delivered her verdict. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her gaze steady, "this court finds you not guilty of the charges that led to your original conviction. Furthermore, based on the compelling new evidence presented, the court finds clear evidence of misconduct and procedural violations in your initial case. Your conviction is hereby overturned. You are declared innocent." A gasp, then an even louder roar of applause, swept through the courtroom. "As for the charges pertaining to the fraudulent property claim against your mother, based on the overwhelming evidence you have presented, this court rules in favor of Mrs. Thorne. The property rightfully belongs to her, and I will be initiating a full investigation into the legal firm involved and the conduct of Officer Jensen." David's victory was a profound vindication, not just personal, but a powerful exposure of systemic flaws within the justice system and a triumphant testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The unwritten verdict of his relentless study had finally been delivered, bringing light to the darkest corners of injustice. He stood on the courtroom floor, a free man for the first time in years, his heart filled not with anger, but with a quiet, overwhelming sense of peace. His mother, weeping with joy, rushed to embrace him, her frail body trembling with relief. Maria, his sister, embraced him fiercely, her tears mingling with his own. The profound triumph resonated far beyond the walls of the courtroom, echoing the powerful truth that justice, though often delayed, can never be truly denied, especially when championed by an unwavering spirit. The hushed silence of the courtroom, moments ago filled with the momentous declaration of innocence, slowly dissolved into a joyous cacophony, a wave of profound relief washing over the assembled crowd. The dazzling flashes of media cameras, like an unexpected burst of lightning, illuminated every corner of the grand chamber, capturing the raw emotion of the moment. The murmuring of journalists, their pens scratching furiously against paper, quickly escalated into a clamor as they rushed to break the news. Amidst this controlled chaos, the emotional embraces of David Thorne, now a free man, and his overjoyed family, his frail mother, her face radiant with a happiness he hadn't seen in years, and his anxious sister, Maria, weeping tears of profound relief, became the central focus, a powerful testament to the triumph of truth over injustice. The news of David's staggering victory, a story of an ordinary man's extraordinary resilience, reverberated far beyond the courthouse walls, sparking a national conversation about the pervasive flaws within the justice system and the incredible power of an individual's unyielding spirit. For prosecutor Evelyn Reed, the formidable legal professional, the abrupt and public dismantling of her seemingly airtight case was nothing short of a professional catastrophe, a public humiliation of unprecedented scale. Her reputation, meticulously built over years on an unblemished conviction record and an aura of invincibility, suffered a severe, perhaps irreparable, blow. While she didn't face immediate disbarment, her office quickly initiated a rigorous internal investigation into her prosecutorial conduct, meticulously scrutinizing her aggressive tactics, her seemingly unquestioning reliance on flawed evidence, and her critical oversight in the Thorne case. Her once guaranteed path to a higher judicial appointment, a dream she had relentlessly pursued, now seemed irrevocably blocked, replaced by the chilling prospect of severe professional repercussions and the gnawing regret of having so casually and arrogantly dismissed David as a mere amateur, a trivial obstacle. Her formidable confidence, once her most potent weapon, was shaken to its very core, and she was forced to confront the uncomfortable, undeniable truth that her relentless pursuit of convictions had, in this egregious instance, tragically overshadowed the fundamental pursuit of genuine justice. This profound and public fall was a direct, proportional consequence for an adversary type A, who had prioritized personal career advancement and statistical triumph over ethical practice and the very essence of truth. The dramatic exposure of systemic misconduct within the prison system, specifically regarding the deliberate obstruction of inmate legal access, also led to broader, far-reaching investigations. Corrupt officials involved in the original injustice that had plagued David's incarceration were swiftly and publicly exposed, facing severe disciplinary actions and, in some egregious cases, criminal charges. The prison's internal procedures underwent a sweeping overhaul, meticulously designed to ensure greater transparency, accountability, and fair access to legal resources for all inmates, marking a significant, albeit hard-won, victory for the countless silent victims still behind bars. Officer Mark Jensen, the rigid correctional officer who had actively, insidiously sabotaged David's legal efforts from within the prison walls, faced immediate and severe consequences. The judge's explicit denouncement of his obstructive tactics, meticulously detailed by David in open court, utterly destroyed Jensen's credibility within the prison system. He was publicly discredited, stripped of his rank, and immediately placed on administrative leave, pending a full, uncompromising internal investigation that threatened to permanently end his career. His once unyielding certainty, his rigid adherence to arbitrary rules, was replaced by a palpable sense of bitter, bewildered humiliation, forced to acknowledge David's undeniable, superior intellect and his unwavering resolve. Jensen was left to grapple with the crushing weight of his own prejudiced actions and the irreversible damage he had wrought through his petty cruelty and institutional arrogance. His public downfall served as a stark, uncompromising reminder that even within the confines of a seemingly impenetrable prison system, truth would ultimately prevail, and justice, though often delayed, could not be denied. For David Thorne, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous, a profound metamorphosis born from the crucible of injustice. Released from prison, his innocence fully and unequivocally proclaimed, he was embraced by a tidal wave of genuine support from unexpected corners. Pro bono legal offers poured in from prestigious law firms across the nation. Academic institutions offered him guest lecturing positions, eager to hear his unique perspective, and legal advocacy groups clamored for his compelling story, recognizing its immense power to inspire. He was no longer just okay, but profoundly thriving. His sharp legal intellect and unshakable integrity now fully recognized, widely celebrated, and deeply respected. He didn't seek personal wealth or retribution. However, his agonizing experience had given him a new, profound, and overarching purpose, a calling that transcended personal gain. Instead, he channeled his boundless energy into establishing a groundbreaking nonprofit legal advocacy group, aptly named the Exonerees Compass, dedicated solely to fighting wrongful convictions and reforming the labyrinthine justice system from within its very foundations. He secured initial, crucial funding from a diverse group of philanthropists deeply moved by his astonishing story, and quickly assembled a small, yet fiercely dedicated team of passionate lawyers, legal researchers, and former exonerees. The Exonerees Compass rapidly became a shining beacon of hope for countless wrongfully convicted individuals across the country. David and his team meticulously reviewed old, dusty case files, systematically seeking out the subtle legal loopholes, the forgotten precedents, the minute procedural errors, and the long-buried pieces of exculpatory evidence that had tragically trapped so many innocent lives behind bars. They worked tirelessly, often late into the night, driven by David's unwavering dedication to truth and equitable justice. He drew upon his direct, agonizing experience of incarceration, his profound understanding of the prison system's inner workings, and his self-taught, formidable legal expertise to empower others, to give voice to the voiceless. His insights, born from the crucible of his own confinement, were invaluable, offering a unique, empathetic perspective that traditional lawyers, far removed from the brutal reality of prison life, often tragically missed. One quiet afternoon, David sat in his spacious, new office at the Exonerees Compass headquarters, the city lights twinkling softly beyond his large, clear window, a gentle reminder of the vibrant world he had fought so hard to rejoin. The room, meticulously organized yet filled with a palpable sense of vibrant purpose, was a stark contrast to the stark, cold cell he had once inhabited, powerfully symbolizing the clarity, order, and profound impact he had brought to his own life and to the complex machinery of justice he now profoundly influenced. His desk was impeccably clear, save for a few meticulously organized, yet currently active, case files pertaining to ongoing high-profile wrongful conviction appeals. Prominently displayed, in a place of honor, was a framed reproduction of the obscure legal precedent he had unearthed in the dim confines of the prison library. The single legal flaw that had ultimately secured his freedom and shattered the illusion of his guilt. Beside it lay his worn leather-bound journal, its cover softened by countless hours of handling, its pages filled not with grim prison details, but with his ongoing philosophical musings on the evolving nature of justice, the delicate, intricate balance between mercy and accountability, and the boundless potential of human insight to resolve even the most intractable legal mysteries. This journal was his sanctuary, his continued intellectual crucible, a living testament to his life's profound journey from unjust confinement to triumphant liberation. Ms. Eleanor Vance, the wise and observant prison librarian, now officially retired, but serving as a key, invaluable advisor for David's burgeoning foundation, sat across from him, a warm, knowing smile gracing her lips, a shared understanding passing between them. Their conversation was a reflective dialogue, a quiet, intimate moment to look back on the long, arduous journey they had traversed, a path that had begun, improbably, in the hushed confines of a prison library, amidst dusty tomes and whispered hopes. "It feels surreal sometimes, David," Ms. Vance murmured, her voice soft, yet imbued with profound satisfaction. "To think where you were, where we met, in that grim place, and now, this. You've truly built something extraordinary, something that transcends even the greatest legal victories. You've built hope where there was none." David smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile that finally reached his eyes. A profound sense of inner peace settling over him. He picked up the smooth, worn pebble he still carried, habitually in his pocket, turning it gently between his fingers. It was a brutal journey. Ms. Vance, the despair, the frustration, the feeling of being utterly helpless. It was almost unbearable. But my incarceration, as brutal as it was ultimately the crucible that forged my true purpose. It forced me to look deeper, to question harder, and to discover a talent for law I never knew I possessed. To see the system from the inside out, with all its glaring flaws and hidden strengths. He paused, his gaze drifting to the framed photo of his mother on his desk, her face beaming with relief, a constant reminder of the profound love that had fueled his fight. And it taught me that true freedom isn't just about walking outside these walls. It's about fighting for justice, for others, for those who can't fight for themselves, for those who are still trapped in cages of injustice. Ms. Vance nodded, her eyes warm with a deep, abiding respect. "You taught us all that, David. You showed us that resilience isn't just about enduring, it's about transforming adversity into powerful, meaningful action. You reminded me why I became a paralegal in the first place, why the law truly matters beyond its technicalities, why every life deserves a champion." She paused, then added, "Officer Jensen, he's on early medical retirement now. They say he's taken to growing vegetables in his backyard. A quiet life, away from the system he so rigidly defended." She didn't gloat, nor did David find any pleasure in the news. He simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker in his eyes. There was no triumph in the demise of his tormentor, only the quiet, sober recognition of a journey concluded, a balance restored. "The greatest revenge," David said, his voice thoughtful, resonating with newfound wisdom, "is living well, Miss Vance, and helping others live well. My incarceration, though it felt like a curse, a profound injustice, was ultimately the catalyst that forced me to reclaim my true artistic voice, to fight for a justice that extends far beyond the confines of the courtroom, beyond the written statutes. It taught me the profound lesson that even in the darkest of places, a small act of kindness, a single whispered word of encouragement, a meticulous detail in a legal brief, can begin to untangle the most complex webs of injustice." He recognized that his life's purpose was far grander than simply securing his own freedom. It was about actively dismantling the systemic flaws that had trapped him and countless others, building bridges of hope where only walls had stood. The new calm he now experienced was not merely the absence of conflict or the end of his struggle, but the profound inner peace that came from living a life aligned with his deepest values. A peace that radiated outwards, subtly influencing the world around him, inspiring countless others. He felt an immense gratitude for the opportunity to use his unique gifts for the greater good, to lead not through command, but through compassion, a powerful blueprint for a future built on unwavering principles and a tireless pursuit of equity. His self-taught legal expertise, once a secret confined to prison walls, was now the foundation of a profound movement for change, ensuring that the unheard voices of the incarcerated, the forgotten victims of injustice, would finally find their advocate, their champion, their compass. 5 years later, the stark, cold confines of the prison cell that had once defined David Thorne's existence were nothing more than a fading, distant memory, a faint echo of the profound struggles he had so resolutely overcome. His life, once unjustly confined and shrouded in the bleak monotony of incarceration, had blossomed into something truly extraordinary and deeply fulfilling. He now occupied a spacious, sun-drenched office on the upper floors of a meticulously restored building in the heart of the city, its large panoramic windows offering a breathtaking view of a bustling metropolis that, slowly but surely, was meticulously beginning to incorporate his groundbreaking legal methodologies and his profound vision for a more equitable justice system. His meteoric rise from a wrongfully convicted inmate to a universally revered figure in legal reform was nothing short of miraculous. Defying all conventional expectations and bureaucratic inertia, he was not merely a legal advocate. He was a highly respected, truly transformative leader in criminal justice reform, widely hailed as a pioneer whose name was synonymous with unwavering integrity, compassionate innovation, and an unshakable commitment to systemic justice. His foundation, once a nascent dream, now served as a shining model for fairness and genuine community engagement across the entire nation. A beacon of hope for other beleaguered jurisdictions grappling with complex, seemingly intractable issues of injustice. He was not just okay, but profoundly thriving. His razor-sharp legal intellect perfectly combined with an innate, boundless sense of compassion, a rare and powerful blend of analytical brilliance and heartfelt empathy. His personal life, too, had finally found a harmonious and sustainable balance, allowing him precious restorative time for passions and joys beyond the demanding, ceaseless role he so admirably and tirelessly fulfilled. He was, in essence, an unwavering compass for truth and justice in a world often lost in its own labyrinthine shadows. David was now a globally recognized authority in legal reform, a sought-after speaker at prestigious legal conferences, and a respected legal scholar whose groundbreaking insights shaped national policy and investigative standards. He frequently lectured at top universities on the ethics of criminal justice, the inherent biases within the legal system, and the profound human element of incarceration, weaving his own searing personal experiences into compelling narratives that inspired countless students to pursue careers in public defense, legal advocacy, and systemic reform. His life reflected a profound peace, not merely the absence of conflict, but the vibrant, active presence of purpose and meaningful connection. His methodologies, once dismissed as theories from a jailhouse lawyer, were now meticulously studied and widely emulated in national training programs for legal professionals. True to his deepest convictions, which had been forged in the crucible of his own profound injustices and the brutal realities of confinement, David established the Exonerees Compass Foundation. This impactful nonprofit organization quickly became a powerful beacon of hope and practical support in the complex landscape of wrongful conviction, advocacy, and post-exoneration support. This initiative was singularly dedicated to meticulously providing comprehensive legal aid to individuals fighting wrongful convictions, often utilizing cutting-edge forensic analysis and legal research to help them uncover hidden truths. It actively funded crucial independent research into systemic biases embedded within prosecutorial practices and police investigations, and offered invaluable mentorship and tangible support to aspiring legal advocates and reform-minded prosecutors, particularly those from marginalized communities who often lacked access to such opportunities. David poured his vast experience, his formidable intellect, and his unyielding passion into the Foundation's vital mission, personally ensuring that resources reached those who needed them most, directly challenging the very structures and ingrained prejudices that perpetually perpetuated injustice and overlooked crucial evidence. He tirelessly advocated for sweeping, transformative policy changes at both federal and state levels. His voice, once brutally silenced by the system, now a powerful, resonant force in legislative chambers and public forums. He championed groundbreaking initiatives that promoted a more transparent and equitable legal process, dramatically expanded access to post-conviction review services for the indigent, and fostered greater accountability for prosecutorial misconduct and investigative biases. His former prosecutor, Evelyn Reed, having faced internal investigations and professional repercussions, eventually expressed a quiet, private apology for her role in his initial conviction, a testament to the transformative power of David's public vindication. Officer Mark Jensen, though still grappling with his own past, had, through years of mandatory training and a painful process of self-reflection, become a testament to the possibility of personal growth and redemption. occasionally consulting with the exoneree's compass on issues of inmate legal access. A profound shift in his perspective. Ms. Eleanor Vance, his former prison librarian, had become his closest confidant and an invaluable board member of his foundation. Her quiet wisdom a constant source of guidance and support. David often spent his weekends quietly leading small, intimate workshops within the very prisons that had once held him captive. He wasn't just overseeing, he was actively and personally participating in the Foundation's direct legal education programs for inmates. He might be seen sitting patiently with a group of bewildered prisoners in a dusty prison library, gently guiding their hands as they navigated complex legal texts, his voice calm and reassuring. Or he might be at a local community center, teaching basic legal rights and self-advocacy skills to formerly incarcerated individuals, empowering them to rebuild their lives and avoid re-entry into the system. He spent countless, dedicated hours mentoring a new generation of legal advocates, personally guiding them, instilling in them the critical importance of compassion, unwavering ethical practice, and an absolute, non-negotiable commitment to the pursuit of lasting, equitable justice. He ensured that no bright mind, no desperate plea, was ever silenced or overlooked, just as he once nearly was. He wanted to make sure that the brilliance he had discovered within himself, born from the crucible of injustice, would now serve as a beacon for countless others. One crisp autumn afternoon, the golden, diffused light of late afternoon streamed through the tall, expansive windows of his spacious office at the exoneree's compass headquarters, bathing the room in a subtle, comforting warmth. His office, meticulously organized yet filled with a palpable sense of vibrant purpose, was a stark contrast to the chaotic clutter of his former prison cell, powerfully symbolizing the clarity, order, and profound impact he had brought to his own life, and to the complex machinery of justice he now influenced. His desk was impeccably clear, save for a few meticulously organized, yet currently active, case files pertaining to ongoing high-profile wrongful conviction appeals. Prominently displayed, in a place of honor, was a framed reproduction of the obscure legal precedent he had unearthed in the prison library, the single legal flaw that had ultimately secured his freedom. Beside it lay his worn leather-bound journal, its cover softened by countless hours of handling, its pages filled not with grim prison details, but with his ongoing philosophical musings on the evolving nature of justice, the delicate, intricate balance between mercy and accountability, and the boundless potential of human insight to resolve even the most intractable legal mysteries. This journal was his sanctuary, his continued intellectual crucible, a living testament to his life's profound journey from confinement to liberation. The faint, almost imperceptible scar on his left thumb, a relic from his childhood farm accident, was now barely visible, a distant, almost forgotten memory of a past he had not just overcome, but profoundly transformed. It was no longer a harsh mark of vulnerability or past trauma, but a subtle whisper of quiet resilience, a silent, powerful testament to the unshakable inner strength that had guided him through every challenge, every setback, and every perilous legal battle. He looked up, his gaze steady, compassionate, and filled with a profound sense of purpose, as a new mentee, a young, eager law student named Alex, visibly nervous, yet brimming with eager ambition, tentatively entered his office. Alex clutched a thick, complex case study to their chest, their posture stiff with the weight of responsibility. The case involving a particularly challenging unsolved murder, echoing the very crises David himself had once faced. David smiled warmly, a genuine, encouraging smile that now often reached his eyes, radiating an aura of calm authority and profound wisdom. He gestured for Alex to sit in the comfortable chair opposite his desk, a silent invitation to share their burden and their aspirations. His hand, calm and steady, rested gently, almost unconsciously, on his worn leather-bound journal. Its smooth, worn leather, a palpable connection to the wealth of wisdom he had both painstakingly gained and now sought, with boundless generosity, to impart. Tell me about your case." "Alex," David began, his voice soft but firm, filled with the resonant understanding of profound experience and unwavering purpose. "And tell me, what does your gut truly tell you about the story the victim is trying to tell you? Remember, the law is not just about facts. It's about the truth hidden within the human experience. Your most powerful tool will be your ability to listen, truly listen, to the silence between the lines, and to perceive the justice that often goes unwritten. In that powerful, quiet moment, the continuous cycle of mentorship, the unwavering, relentless pursuit of a more empathetic and just world, and the enduring legacy of compassion, all rooted deeply in David's extraordinary and inspiring journey, continued its gentle, powerful, and ever-expanding flow, echoing the profound truth that even the smallest, most ignored clues, if pursued with courage and integrity, can illuminate the darkest corners of human injustice and bring lasting, transformative peace and freedom.